Yes! First comments of the broadcast, Rody again, 2 broadcasts in a row, back to back, maybe 3 actually. That might be 3 in a row for you, back to back to back. Hi. Welcome to A Moments in Time with Taylor. Thank you guys for tuning in live and on the replay. This is going to be a pretty short broadcast, but a lot of awesome information jam-packed into about 20 minutes or so. So thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to help us to keep this channel going and growing together, click the link in our profile, nexjuice.com/support, and you can contribute as little as $5. Hey Juicy, ni hao to you as well. So here we go. I have recently started taking courses in psychology. I am ultimately going to be pursuing my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling, and my associate's degree online classes start on Monday. Luckily, my psychology teacher, my Psych 101 teacher, has already begun to upload some of the coursework for the semester, even though we're still a few days before the technical start of class. Hey RD, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. And I've started doing some of the coursework already. So as I've been telling you guys, I got a textbook for $5. It's a 737-page textbook called The Science of Psychology by Laura King. It's the 4th edition. The cover of the book is an orange. Okay, so, and it's all, the whole book is like oranges. There's a bunch of oranges around, so I love it already. Totally a sign that we're on the right path, on the right track, even if we get a little bit stressed about the financial requirements for the classes. I know that we can do this. You can also contribute directly to my education fund by going to my Twitter page, NexJuice, NexJuice, Juice, and pinned right to the top of my profile is my GoFundMe for the amount that I've already paid towards classes. And that's gofundme.com/nextjuice1. Exactly, Sir Zyle. It's awesome, right? Weird coincidence for sure. Thank you, Viphot. Good to see you. Good to see you. So I started reading through this textbook. And remember, I could, if I bought it through the bookstore at my college, for a used version of this textbook, it was $200. A used version, $200. And instead, I got the ebook version of it on eBay for $5. So it was awesome. Now, I started taking notes last night on the chapter 1, which is part of my assignment. I have to read chapter 1, chapter 3. And I also watched a 36-minute video on YouTube, which was another part of my assignment, all about the fundamentals of psychology and introduction to psychology. So I tweeted out the link to the YouTube video on my Twitter page a few days ago, so you can check that out. And this is what I learned. And this is a combination between information that I've learned from what I've read so far in chapter 1 and what I've learned from the video. Okay? Yoga. Yeah, yoga. My yoga hoodie. I got kind of cold, so. There's spinach in my teeth. All right, we're looking good. Hey, Kenny. Yeah, I have a shirt that says I trust you as well. How are you, Kenny? So the 2 founding fathers of psychology, the psychology pioneers. First is Wilhelm Wundt, who was alive between 1832 and 1920. So that goes to show how young psychology really is. I mean, this guy he died 100 years ago, and less than 100 years before that, he invented psychology. He separated the concept of psychology out from the concepts of philosophy, which do involve the mind to some extent. I'm actually going to be taking a philosophy class this semester as well, so we'll do a little philosophy talks as well, talking about all the different philosophers, but for now we're talking psychology. So he actually was the one who separated psychology from philosophy, and he invented a methodology or a type of psychology called structuralism. And this is where he wanted to explore the structures of the mind and of the brain, and really start to explore the brain, the first person in history to really explore and study the mind and the brain. So what he did was his first ever experiment, his groundbreaking experiment, he founded the first ever psychology laboratory, was he had people listen to a sound, and when they heard a sound, they pushed a button to test reaction time. And that was the first experiment of its kind that way, to determine how long does it take the brain to process information, to process stimuli, and to form a behavior or an action. And then they wanted to figure out, like what really caused that to happen. Then, not long after him, there was William James, and he was alive from 1842 to 1910. A little bit shorter of a life, but still about 100 years ago. And he created a school of thought within psychology called functionalism. So whereas Wilhelm Wundt was more interested in the what and the structures of the brain and of the mind, William James was more interested in how it does what it does and why. So he had the concept that the mind is a very diverse and constantly evolving thing. And that's really pretty amazing because the neuroplasticity is something that's just recently really been proven by science. The fact that neurons and neural pathways can change in our minds from different repeated behaviors or stimulus. And he knew this all the way back then, that the mind was constantly evolving and changing. Basically realizing developmental psychology, seeing that there is a difference between the mind of an infant and the mind of a senior citizen, right? Hey Swift Beats, how are you? Hey Noelle. So he thinks that we should focus more on why and how a person does something that they do, determine the reason, and then associate that with the mental processes. He also coined the term stream of consciousness to refer to the natural flow of thoughts. And that's interesting because when I first started streaming about 2.5 years ago, we worked a lot with stream of consciousness writing, which is where you just keep your pen moving as you write with every thought that comes into your mind. And that's actually a concept that I learned from The Artist's Way, which is a book by Julia Cameron. So I read a lot of books. If you're not already following, please do. I'm live every single day for 3 hours a day. 23 chromosomes, nice. Okay, so psychology studies memory, learning, motivation, perception, sensation, emotion, intelligence, thinking, personality, social behavior, language, and more. So the major branches of psychology, and we're going to go over this basically twice because there was one in the video, they have their major branches, and that's what I'm going to go over first. And then when I was reading through the textbook, they had a different, basically, way of looking at some of these things. Hey, Alan, how are you? So some of this is going to be a little bit repetitive, but I found that when you see something repeated a lot of times, it's probably beneficial to remember it. And this is also helping me to study because these are my notes on the topic, and the best way to learn and remember something is by teaching it. So thanks for letting me study with you guys, and hopefully you learn something that you find interesting as well. So first we have psychopathology, which deals with the diseases associated with the mind: depression, OCD, bipolar disorder, sexual disorders, and more. A brain autopsy video, watched it, now you're talking about the brain. There you go, Pasquale. My cousin is actually a neuropsychologist, and she has dissected 3 brains this year. I think it was this year, in the past year. And that's what most people think of when they think of psychologists. They think that, oh, if you're sitting next to a psychologist on a plane, right? So you're chatting with someone, you don't know what they do, you're just chatting, and then all of a sudden, you say, oh, what do you do for work? And they say, I'm a psychologist, and you're already immediately like, oh, like, what do they know about me that I don't know about myself? What have I already revealed to this person? And the reality is that all psychologists don't work in a clinical setting. They don't all treat patients. And not all psychologists are interested in psychopathology, which is diseases of the mind. Some are interested in how do the eyes work? How does perception and sensation work in the mind? Some people study animals and behaviors in animals and how that compares to behaviors in humans. So don't always feel like a psychologist is always trying to analyze you and find some mental illness that you have underlying, Yes, thank you, sir. So Heavenly Dew, my classes technically start on Monday, the 29th, but my Psych 101 teacher already started uploading some of the coursework, so I'm getting a head start on next week's assignments. I started working on it yesterday and last night. Some just do research. Absolutely. Yep, exactly. That's more like a PhD. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Hopefully you guys find some of this interesting. I love this stuff. I find a lot of it very interesting. This stuff is more like the basis, but when there's this next part, actually, I find really interesting. Hey, Deb. So this is behavioral psychology, or behaviorism, another major branch of psychology. This theory says that all behaviors are acquired through learning and practicing, or also known as conditioning. lost some popularity in the 1950s. So I think as things have progressed, people are starting to realize that there is some biological component to psychology, that it's not all, we don't learn everything. Some things are involuntary responses that we have. Nice stuff. Awesome. Thanks for inviting your followers, Nikki Sparkles. All right, awesome. Awesome, Heavenly. I love it. So you have two types of conditioning, classical conditioning or operant conditioning. So we'll start with classical conditioning, which is also sometimes called respondent conditioning. And these are the involuntary responses that results from, I should change my notes here, that result from experiences that occur before a response. Some stimuli invoke an unconditioned response, like kissing, elevated heart rate, for example. A neutral stimulus that occurs during that stimulus will result in the same response in the future. For example, if there's a song playing during a kiss, that song was a neutral stimulus before. It didn't cause any involuntary reactions in your body, virtually. Let's just say it doesn't. And then next time you hear it, maybe you have, exactly, Pavlov, you have an elevated heart rate because you associate that song now with kissing. You know, so you learn certain responses due to conditioning. Pavlov's dog, exactly. Some people know about Pavlov's dog, which was an inhumane experiment where, was his name? I forget his first name, but Pavlov, he basically was like giving electrical shock to dogs. When he would like ring a bell and then shock the dogs. And then he found that if he rang the bell but didn't shock the dogs, they still had the same response as if they were being shocked, because they anticipated that they would be shocked because they associated with it. How do you recondition your amygdala? That's actually a really great question. I don't know the answer to it yet, but I'm sure I'm going to learn that over my studies. But if you meet with a therapist or counselor now, they can probably help you with that. You don't have to wait for me to get my degree. Okay, so the second type is operant conditioning, and this is instrumental conditioning. This is what I thought was most interesting. Ethics came later in psych. Yeah, exactly, Mr. Owl. So this is changes in behavior as a result of experiences that occur after a response. Voluntary behavioral changes based on reinforcement or punishment. Reinforcement results in the behavior being increased, and punishment results in the behavior being decreased. Reporting, everyone? I don't know what you're talking about, but feel free to continue trolling if you would like. Fight or flight. Thank you, Ed, for muting that person. That's another unblockable troll. Fight or flight? No, fight or flight is amygdala. That's what he was talking about. This is positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, or negative punishment. Thanks, Deb. I do need psych help from my teachers as I learn psychology. Okay. So positive reinforcement is the addition of something positive. This is like a reward. The phone's ringing. This is like you do something and then you get something good in exchange for it. So say you do a good job at work, you get a bonus, you get a raise, or you get your paycheck. All these things would be considered positive reinforcement. Yeah, I couldn't think of a good comeback, Clonican, so that wasn't very good, but hey. Secondly, we have negative reinforcement. I had never really I've heard of this, but I didn't fully understand the difference between negative reinforcement and punishment. Thank you, Clowny. Meaning fight is negative, flight is reward. I don't really know that I agree with that, because fight is not negative. Fight, you're adding something, right? You're adding violence, you're adding aggression. So, negative and positive in this sense don't mean good or bad. Positive means addition, negative means subtraction, more like math. Monetary reinforcement, yeah. So that might be a positive reinforcement for someone, or like a cookie, like someone will say, what do you want, a cookie or a trophy? Those are like positive reinforcements. So negative reinforcement is the removal of something undesirable. So this is like, I don't know why my mind just went here, but say someone's being tortured, right? So you're being tortured. Well, if you give me what I want, which is the information, I'm going to stop torturing you. So that's reinforcement. That's getting the behavior that I want by taking away something that you don't like. I had the worst comment typed out about rewards. Oh, okay. And you deleted it? Or taking a pill to get rid of a headache or to get rid of some pain in your body. That's actually a negative reinforcement. That's the removal of something unpleasant. okay, to get a certain behavior that's caused by a certain behavior, like taking the medicine. The next is positive punishment. So this is the addition of something negative. Okay, so here it's like, it's not, negative probably isn't the best word, but it is the word they used in the textbook, or in the, actually this was an article that I looked up in one of the articles I read. So this is the addition of something unpleasing, let's say it that way. So positive punishment means you're adding something someone doesn't like. So this is like torturing, okay? Early release is negative reinforcement. Yeah, if you don't like what you're doing, yeah. That would have got me blocked. Ed would have liked that. Okay. So this is adding something someone doesn't like to punish them, to try to decrease a certain behavior. Okay. So this is like maybe spanking someone. Or like sending them to their room or something. Now, negative punishment is when you remove something pleasing. So you take away video games, or you take away something that somebody likes. You take away their bonus. You know, they do something bad at work and you say, okay, well, you're no longer up for a bonus this year or something. Spanking is negative, and Ed says, what if they like it? Oh my gosh, you guys, this is ridiculous. Grounding. So grounding would be that would actually probably, you could consider that positive and negative punishment, because you're adding a layer of, well, I guess that's mainly just negative punishment. You know, you're removing freedom. There you go. You're removing freedom and probably a lot of other activities that they consider pleasing. So that I found to probably be the most interesting thing I've learned so far. I know all the people are like, spank me, spank me. Positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. Such a flexible topic. Heavenly duo, I love that. Okay, so our third major branch of psychology is biopsychology, or physiological psychology. Also, this is closely associated with neuroscience. So this is the actual study of the physical brain. And this is how the brain affects the way that people behave and their personality. And they also study things like the neurons, the neural pathways, the endocrine system. I don't spank on my scope. Noelle, now you're implying that I spank off my scope. Sure, Dub, that is an example of positive reinforcement. Now, this is what my cousin does. I was just talking about my cousin has dissected 3 brains this year. I think it was this year. And she's a neuropsychologist. And she's not quite there yet, but she's on her way. She's in like her master's program, I think, for to be a neuropsychologist. So she studies the actual brain. And she actually witnessed some procedures that I could not imagine witnessing. This is not the branch of psychology that would be well suited for me to actually study brains and to dissect brains. But she saw craniotomy, which is the removal of the skull cap. And then, I don't know exactly what they call it, but they removed the brain and entire spinal cord from a cadaver. And she witnessed that. She said it took like 20 minutes. But she said the spinal cord took longer, but the brain itself comes out in like 20 minutes, and that just freaked me out. But that's what they study. They study the actual spinal cord and the actual brain. My friend had whoa. Okay, all right, that's too much information, Dub, even for me. All right, the fourth branch is cognitive psychology. These are more abstract subjects such as attention, thinking, problem solving, decision making, and motivation. So cognition is the thought processes. These are things that as of right now, we don't have any way of really measuring other than people telling us what they're thinking, what they're feeling. There's not really any, we can measure responses like elevated heart rate, increase, quickness of breath, shallowness of breath, but we don't necessarily know what they're feeling. Are they feeling angry? Or are they feeling afraid? It's the cognitive process, what they're actually thinking. So even if we knew if they're feeling afraid, do we know what they're afraid of? What are the actual thoughts they're having? Not really, unless they tell us, So the cognitive psychology is more abstract. Comparative psychology is what I was talking about, studying animals. So studying animal behavior and then comparing that to human behavior and trying to make inferences based off the animal kingdom. Cognitive behavior. Yep, so we talked about behavioral therapy and behaviorists, and then cognitive therapy. So cognitive behavioral therapy is the combination of those two methodologies. Cognitive being thoughts, behavior being what you do. Behavior we can measure and see. We can see what a behavior is if somebody does something, or a crying is a behavior, so we can measure that and see that happening, whereas we don't necessarily know why they're crying, what their thoughts are when they're crying, what their actual feelings and emotions are, and what their motivation is, like what drives them. Hey Asha, you're doing cognitive behavioral. Yeah, that's probably the most common and popular form of therapy right now in this day and age. Couldn't read it all before Deb was muted. Deb was muted or Dub was muted? They try to with EKGs, brain scans. Yep. Can't sleep too hot. I know. Janine was live earlier talking about how in England you guys don't have air conditioning in your buildings. This is weird. EMDR, yep, so the eye movements for people with PTSD, that's actually somewhat new, and that actually goes more into like biopsychology, the effects of the physical body on psychology. Hi, Ralph. Hey, John, just fans. Oh my gosh, you guys. Yeah, exactly, Dub. So now you can connect with all of England who are having their heat wave right now and don't have air conditioning, apparently. All right, so the sixth branch, we have cross-cultural psychology. So this one's exactly what it sounds like. Differences in cultures, like morals, ethics, etc., are going to cause different behaviors. Reading a site today and found a lot of therapists identifying as life coaches. Interesting. Okay, try to focus, Juicy. I know you have a really hard time with that sometimes. Hey, Brent. Many nonverbal communication researchers do studies on microgestures. Ooh, yeah, that's like that show Lie to Me. Microgestures are super interesting. I'm hiding comments to learn people. Couldn't read Dub, not Deb comment. Sorry about the word left behind. Oh, that's okay. If you click the muted comment, you can see what it says. Hey, Bob. I think I belong here. Hello, you're late. Why are you late? Go to the principal's office. Okay, wait. Okay, no, stop. All right. Number 7, developmental psychology. This is the study of different periods of the human life from prenatal through death, why and how people change over time. You have a degree in psychology? Nice. What level of degree? Yeah, so lame, yet hilarious. My car wouldn't start. I helped a bus full of nuns. All right, you're excused now. Sit down and pipe down. Just kidding. All right, so I'm going to skip ahead to some of my notes from the textbook on developmental psychology because I don't know exactly when Ed's going to get home with the kids. I said this was going to be a 20-minute broadcast, and it's been 23 minutes. So I'm just going to skip so we don't miss this part because this is so interesting to me as well. This blew my mind. I loved this part. So this is somewhere. Why am I not seeing it? I feel like a bunch of my notes that I took yesterday are not here. Oh no! What happened? Why aren't they here? Oh my gosh, that's so sad. No, wait. No, it should be good. Why am I not seeing it? It's gotta be here. I'm just not seeing it somehow. Okay, I wasn't seeing it. All right, I found it. I found it. Thank you. Why am I saying thank you? Make you want to break out your psych books and reread them. Pick the ones with the oranges on them by Laura King. You look dehydrated, need sausage water. Interaction between psychology, sociology, anthropology, philosophy is interesting. Yeah, I'm actually taking Philosophy 101 and Psych 101 simultaneously. Is that Ed? Ed, I don't have time. I'm trying to read this really quick. Okay, the psychosocial stages of a human. There are 8. Number 1 is infancy. Birth to 18 months. Now, for each of these life stages, there's one main trait that is developed during this time. One main personality, not personality, just one main psychological trait that's developed during this time, one or the other. So this is really, really fascinating for parents, for yourself, for interacting with people in all different stages of their life. If you know this, you're going to know how to empathize better with people at different stages that maybe you haven't even been in yet, and you're going to better be able to kind of understand where people are coming from and why they feel and think and behave the way that they do due to basically this progression. So infancy, birth to 18 months. This is where they establish one of two, trust or mistrust. Are they well cared for? Are they secure? Are they fed? If they're well cared for, then they will feel like they can trust. If they're not, they develop mistrust right from that early age. You have 18 months to make sure that your baby feels trust and establishes trust as one of their psychological traits. Otherwise, they may spend their entire lives being mistrusting, not really trusting anyone, and maybe even themselves. Secondly, early childhood. This is like 2 to 3 years. This is autonomy versus shame and confusion. Autonomy, meaning that they have control over things in the world, or not, which can cause shame and confusion. Now, the most important thing that we teach our children at this age is potty training. If you fail to, according to this, if you fail to teach your children to potty train between 2 and 3 years old, then they're not going to learn autonomy, and they're going to develop shame and confusion. So they feel ashamed that they're unable to use the potty like other kids their age, especially as they get older, and they're confused. There's shame and confusion there. And I am witnessing that with one of my stepchildren, actually. So I can pretty much attest to that. That is of the utmost importance that you figure out this potty training thing in that age group, because there's a lot of confusion and shame, and really the confusion is the one that I probably see more than anything else. Very, very stressful, anxious emotions that come out around potty training, and he's 6.5 years old, so really important stuff. I know I could blame my parents for all my issues. Julie gave Taylor autonomy. How do you make your kids not so comfortable with you that they actually don't joke around so much? Oh, you don't want them to joke around, Noelle? How are the kids? They're good. He pooped his pants till 5, yeah. Okay, so here we have number 3, before school. This is 3 to 5 years old. This is where they establish either initiative or guilt. This is where they start to explore the world in a very messy way. And if we try to cut off that creative space, if we tell them like, no, stop, and we cut them off from what they're doing with exploring the world and the environment around them, they can feel guilt, like they were doing something wrong, which is actually not the case. It's completely natural and right and normal and good for them to explore their environment and learn how to manipulate objects in their environment, how things work in basic physics, right? Instinctual physics. So if they aren't cut off from that period, and obviously if they're going really overboard or if they're putting themselves or others in danger, then we should stop them. But it's challenging to deal with a mess and to deal with such explosive creativity, especially if you have more than one child in the house. But just keep in mind that from the ages of 3 and 5, when they're doing that, it's important to let them explore as much as possible, because this is how they learn that they can take initiative. This is where they want to try new things, they want to experiment, they kind of have their own internal intrinsic motivations. And then number 4, which is school going age. This is 6 to 11 years old. Now this is where they determine either industry or inferiority. All of a sudden they're outside of their home. Thanks, Hector. Michael, thank you for the super hearts. They're exposed to all sorts of new social pressures that they've never experienced before. There's all sorts of new adults, new peers, new different age groups, also amazing amounts of new people in their lives with different peer pressures, social pressures to conform, to act and behave certain ways, and they're all of a sudden they're in a big comparison game. You know, they're being graded now against their peers. They're being judged against their peers. There's incentives, rewards, and programs and charts in their schools that basically tell them if they're as good as the other kids or not. And if they're consistently feeling like they're coming up short, then they could develop an inferiority complex. They could feel inferior and really struggle with industry, being productive and contributing and doing things because they feel inferior. They feel basically hopeless, like they can't measure up. So that's really important, to give them something that they can excel at and do at least as well as everyone else, so that they're not consistently feeling inferior. And this can be challenging for children with learning and developmental disabilities or delays, especially if you don't know yet, because this might be the age in which you really start to discover that. So important too to check in with your doctor regularly if you have any concerns even leading up to this age in terms of development, you know, because then you can put the right supports in place so that they don't develop that inferiority. Then the good old, I know Noelle's favorite time of their life, adolescence, 12 to 18 years old. This is stage 5. This is where they establish either identity, they figure out who they are and they stay true to themselves and they're confident in who they are, or maybe not super confident, they're still adolescents, but they kind of figure out who they are, what they like, what they're like, what their personality really is, and what they stand for, what they value, how they act, how they talk, you know, their actual identity, how they dress, and how they present themselves, or role confusion and being not really sure where they fit in, not really sure who they are, you know, and I think probably most of us struggled with figuring that out in our adolescent years. And if they don't figure it out by age 18, then that might last with them throughout their lives. You know, role confusion, not really knowing, like, what are they here for? What are they meant to do? Who are they? What do they like? You know, they kind of maybe default to other people and just conform to whoever's around, whoever's in power, and they don't really have their own sense of identity, which can be extremely detrimental to mental health. Absolutely. So helping our kids to figure out who they are and to encourage them in their identity, especially if you live in a small town and they go to a small school where there's not a lot of diversity, and you know, embracing and letting them know, showing them other people who have these same traits as them and letting them know, like, it's okay to be this way, even if a lot of other people aren't. Like maybe gay, if they're gay and there's not a lot of gay kids in their school, that might cause them to struggle with their sense of identity. So to know that there's other gay people out there in the world that are very successful and happy, and they can connect with these communities outside of their little town, that can be hugely helpful. It was for me. I remember when I was going through my depression in that age group in adolescence, I wish that I had known that there were people out there like me, people that liked to read books, people that liked to learn and think and use logic, and didn't find it annoying that I asked why for every question, you know. That would have been real helpful. It took me until about age 19 to even really realize that there were people like me out there in the world. So, and that I wasn't alone, you know, I felt really isolated. Homosexuality issues can be hard. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, up until recently, and even now, there's something called sexual disorders in the psychological world, where they actually view certain things in the sexual, in your sexual orientation and in your sexual identity as disorders, which, I don't know. I mean, is homosexuality a sexual disorder? I don't think so. And up until recently, very recently, it was considered that way, that there was something wrong. You had mental illness if you were homosexual. So, I mean, this is very recent that we're starting to feel like that's probably not the case, you know? So, then we have number 6. This is young adulthood, and this is our longest section so far. This is from age 19 to 40 years old. So this is all through your 20s and all through your 30s. From 19 to 40, this is young adulthood. And this is where you establish either intimacy or isolation. This is usually the time where we form lifelong relationships. whether with friends, like people we go to college with, or with lovers, partners, people in our family. We really, establish deeper connections and lifelong connection. I mean, family is usually a lifelong connection, but not everyone's family is the same. So let's just talk friends and lovers. So intimacy, close relationships, people that we trust, people we confide in, people we tell everything to, whether it's sexual intimacy or otherwise, just an intimate relationship, a close, trusting, secure, safe relationship where you're not getting backstabbed and betrayed. Or you do get backstabbed and betrayed and cheated on and lied to, and or you have social deficits that prevent you from being able to establish intimate relationships, or you have maybe like autism, and now you feel isolated. So that this is probably the time of our lives that a lot of us in here are right now. Yeah, someone said that friends are the family we choose. So Michael said family isn't just blood. I agree with that. I feel a lot closer to most of my friends than to a lot of my family members. Pretty much all my family members, but I digress. So intimacy versus isolation. Then, and notice where you're at with that. If you're really struggling with that, you might not have like mental illness. You might not have things going on that you feel so much trauma and grief, and maybe you don't think you need to go to therapy or counseling. But if you're feeling very isolated and you realize now that this is the stage in your life where you basically learn intimacy or you learn isolation, it might be helpful to talk to somebody about this and see what they might suggest or what they might think about this. Let them know that you heard about this and you're just concerned and curious. You don't want to be isolated your whole life. You don't want to learn isolation. You want to learn intimacy and how to have an intimate relationship with people, because we're humans, we're social, and we long to connect and be understood and understand, and to be in partnership with other people. Number 7. Okay. Talks with Taylor. Yes. Number 7 is mid-adulthood. This is from age 40 to 65. This is even longer. This is a 25-year period, 40 to 65. This is where you learn either generativity or stagnation. My guess is that most everyone else in this broadcast, if you're not in the young adulthood phase, you're in the mid-adulthood phase. Thank you, Kyle. 40 to 65. So generativity, this is where you're really focused on your career and your family, and you're generating things. Or you're not. Exactly. Just because you go to therapy does not mean that you have a mental illness. Absolutely not. There's so much more to psychology than mental illness. Hey, boxing. I think that might be Ed that just got home, so we're getting to the end though. So if you're not feeling like you're generating things, like you're generating good things in your career, in your family, in your life, in your goals, then what's the opposite of this is stagnation, where you feel stuck, you feel stagnant, you feel like you're not going anywhere and you're having trouble generating anything. Any of these things are good reasons to go seek therapy or counseling. If you have health insurance, you're covered for at least one visit, if not more than that. Go to your primary care doctor, ask them how you can get involved in this. Some of your primary care doctors may even have degrees in psychology, and they might even talk to you. Just find somebody to talk to, somebody who's trained in developmental psychology and understands how this works and wants to help you figure this out, because it's not hopeless. Whatever stage you're at here, if you're listening to this, there is hope. There can be change. Your brain is plastic. It's neuroplastic. Your neural pathways can change and move, and your behaviors can be changed. Your thought processes can be changed. It's not always going to be an easy path, and it's not going to happen immediately, but the sooner that you seek help, the sooner you can start on that road, maybe a long road, to change, to feeling more positive, feeling more hope for your future. And then finally, we have number 8, the 8th stage of our lives, which is maturity. I completely agree, Hector. Don't even get me started. Maturity. And this is from age 65 right up until death. And this one was probably the most insightful to me. This is where you establish either self-assurance and you feel confident and assured. You look back on your life and you feel proud and nostalgic about your life, or you experience despair, where you look back on your life and you felt like you weren't able to do what you wanted to do. You didn't do what you wanted to do. You have regrets, and you can slip into despair. And people in this age group can become very bitter. Bitter to the outside world, bitter to others, bitter to themselves, just bitter in general. And this is a lot of times you'll hear about like grumpy old men or women, cranky, crotchety, older people. And what we may not realize is that what's happening to them is they're at this point in their life where They're not generating a whole lot of new things, not a whole lot of new relationships. People around them are dying. They're losing their bodies, you know, their control over certain things, their minds, and, you know, they're losing that sharpness. And they're looking back on their life. The main thing they can do at this point in their life is look back on their life and figure out how they feel about it. And they're either going to feel good or they're going to feel bad. And if they feel bad about it, then they basically have the rest of their lives to feel despair. So think about that. The people that you come into contact with, if they seem grumpy or crotchety or something, try to have some empathy. Try to realize that they might have a lot of regrets. They may have a lot of things that happened to them in their lives. They may have felt stuck their whole life, like they could never get ahead. They might blame other people for that, and other people may be to blame for that. I mean, think of people who are Black at that age group right now in our lives, in our country. Most of them didn't have a whole lot of opportunities. You know, Oprah Winfrey, her grandma told Oprah that the best she would ever do, and she was a positive force and positive role model, and was one of the most encouraging people in Oprah's lives, especially her young life. She told her, like, the best that she could hope to do is work for some white people and get the crumbs from their table, and that would be a win. That would be a great success and be so impressive if she could just figure out how to do that. You know, and this is Oprah. Like, you know, she obviously did a lot more than anticipated, but can you imagine what that's like, to think that all you want for your grandchild is that they can be surrounded by white people who will give them the table scraps? You know, it's amazing. So can we blame them for being bitter, you know, when they get older and they look back on their lives and they feel like they were oppressed and kept from what they wanted to do in their lives, and no matter what they tried and what they did, they just couldn't get ahead. They couldn't figure anything out. No, we can't really blame them for that. You know, come a long way, but still more needs to be done. Oh yeah, way more. If we, again, like I said, I mean, psychology is like a 200-year-old concept. It was basically come up with 200 years ago, and not even, less than 200 years ago. It was like 150 years ago. People were like, oh, maybe there's something interesting about our mind. And that's 2 generations. I mean, that's nothing. You know what I mean? That's like virtually nothing. So pretty amazing how far we've come in that period of time, and how much farther we're going to go over this next 150 years too. When he was 60, he told you he was evil his whole life, and now it was too late. Yeah, at that point, he was in mid-adulthood and dealing with stagnation, feeling stuck. And because he didn't figure it out, I'm sure he continued to be in basically despair the rest of his life. Just got home. All right, that's perfect. We at least covered the psychosocial stages of human development. We talked about developmental psychology. There is more to learn about and to talk about. I'll give you the highlights as I learn interesting stuff. I've been posting to my Instagram story too. You can follow me on Instagram. Same handle over there as on here. NexJuice, NexJuice, Juice. That's true. It is never, ever too late, but sometimes it can feel that way. So nexjuice.com/support is the link in my profile. You can help me to keep this channel going and growing together. And if you want to support me on my educational journey, I've spent $2,616 on my education so far, and that number's just going to keep growing and growing and growing. So please do go to my Twitter page, NexJuice, same thing, NexJuice, Juice, and pinned to the top of my Twitter profile is a GoFundMe for my educational adventure that we're going on here together, and hopefully you find value in me sharing it with you. Boxing, thank you for the super hearts. Michael, thank you for the super hearts. You guys are awesome. 2,000 super hearts in this broadcast. Yeah, we did an extra 20 minutes of content today. We've been doing extra content pretty much every day. I love that. We only did an extra 8 minutes yesterday, but it's something. So I hope to see you guys. Yay, Boxing, top contributor to the broadcast. We will shout out the top contributors of Super Hearts from every single broadcast through the month of July at the end of the month, first week of August. I can't thank you guys enough for making this whole show possible, for making my dreams and visions come true and come to reality. I hope that I can help you with yours. Just let me know, reach out to me, and I'll be back tomorrow for 3 more hours of positive content to help you reach your goals. And thank you for the super hearts, and to spread smiles all around the world. I love you, Ed. I'll see you in a minute. Thank you, Jack. I appreciate that. I hope to see you guys on the next Juice. This has been A Moment in Time with Taylor.